Doing the Ayatollah is unique to Cardiff City, but where did it all come about?
In the early 80s, there was a revolution in Iran, and the Ayatollah Khomeini came back to take control. When he died, at his funeral, the Iranians beat their heads in despair. And for some reason, Cardiff City fans adopted that, and that's how it came about. I suppose there was a lot of despair at the time in Cardiff City, so it was a useful thing to do for the fans. Still going on today.
Cardiff have a checkered history over the last 30 years, starting with a very bleak period in the 80s.
Well, it went down from the second division in 1982, but they came back up again in 1983. But there were financial problems within the club, and they weren't able to make further progress. In 1985, they went down from Division 2 to Division 3. A year later, they went into the 4th Division. It was the blackest period in the history of the club. Cardiff City were an up-and-down club in the 1990s. They went up in 93, they went down in 95, come up in 99, went down in 2000. Then Sam Hammam came in, and the club went up in 2001. Ever since the decade began, it's been onward progress. Sam Hammam is no longer with the club, of course, but he started it all, and it's all ended with a new stadium and expectations of Premiership football.
The Bluebirds have a history of upsetting big teams. A fond memory for me was when they beat Leeds United 2-1 in 2002.
Yeah, that was a major upset when Cardiff City beat Leeds United in 2002. Another major upset, if you can call it an upset, was the path to the 2008 FA Cup final when Cardiff beat Wolves 2-0 here in the 5th round, then went to Premiership Middlesbrough and beat them 2-0. They hadn't been to Wembley for 81 years and went there twice in nearly 2 months. The semi-final against Barnsley, which they won 1-0, and then several weeks afterwards, the FA Cup final against Portsmouth.
So how did the Cardiff-Swansea rivalry come about?
Cardiff and Swansea have always been South Wales rivals, but I think it really blew up in the late 1970s when a former Cardiff player, John Toshak, took over as Swansea manager. He took them from the old 4th Division to the 1st Division. Of course, it was success all the way at that time, and there was plenty of publicity. Cardiff, on the other hand, were a mediocre 2nd Division club who went down to the 3rd, so I suppose the Cardiff fans felt a little bit aggrieved that all the publicity was going to Swansea and nothing was coming to them, but Cardiff City weren't really doing anything, so that's how it all started. And I think there's a more social thing, an economic thing, that Cardiff, being the capital of Wales, was always perceived to be getting the social and economic benefits that were coming to South Wales, and Swansea was very much the second city.
So it's the end of an era. Farewell to Ninian Park. Hello to the Cardiff City Stadium. How do Cardiff fans feel about leaving Ninian Park behind?
If you've been going to Ninian Park a long time and stood in your favourite place, you would feel sad about it because it's got great memories. But for people who work within the club, the facilities at this new stadium are so much better, so they probably don't miss it as much as the fans do. For the players, I think it takes time to settle in, but new players coming in who don't know any other Cardiff City home except this one, it doesn't make any difference to them.
What is the ultimate Cardiff City dream team?
Farquharson, the 1920s goalkeeper, he played in 2 FA Cup finals and was an Irish international. Right back, I'd pick Kevin McNaughton because he's a Scottish international, he's outstanding. Don Murray from the 1960s and 70s and Brian Harris alongside him. Could pick Danny Gabidon. Left back, I'd pick Gary Bell because I always thought he was a great fullback. On the right, I would pick Brian Walsh from the 50s. On his day, could beat anyone. In the middle of midfield, I'd have Ian Gibson from the 1970s and Ivor Allchurch, who was a famous Welsh international. And on the left, I would pick George Edwards, who was a goal-scoring left winger who went on to become a director of the club. The 2 front men, I'd have Robert Earnshaw and probably Len Davis from the 20s because he scored 128 goals for the club.
What do you think Bartley Wilson would make of Cardiff City today?
I don't think he'd believe it. I think he'd come down the road and say, "Where's Ninian Park gone?" He'd only have to look across the road and see where it is, what's happening now. I think he'd be very pleased.
Now we've looked at the vibrant history of the Bluebirds, let's look to the future. With a brand new stadium and Premiership dreams, here's to the future of Cardiff.